Hello and welcome to Pale Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most ritualistic work as it releases. I'm Ruben Morehouse.
And I'm not Elliot Diebold.
Whoa, twist.
That's a Snowdrop joke.
Oh my god.
Let's get those out of the way right now.
Yeah. Oh yeah, so I should say we're not recording this episode completely in opposite speak. So it's going to be a great episode. No, let's put that aside right now, I think.
Yes.
We are here to talk about Stolen Away 2.8. I keep wanting to make opposite day jokes now, and it's just stupid. I mean, it's just stupid.
It's the highest form of humor.
Yeah. We are not talking about Stolen Away 2.8. 2.9, the bonus material called End of the Trail, which, oh god, as well as, of course, coming up later, diving into some pale predictions and a new discussion question and an outro. I mean, we never usually talk about it, but it's fun. Maybe, maybe there are people who just listen to this show for the outros, and if you are out there, can I just say, you are bizarre. But let's get into it.
Yes.
So we begin with Stolen Away 2.8, which is from Lucy's POV, and it starts with a very relatable situation. Lucy is trying to show her family a movie that she loves, and they just are not appreciating it.
Yeah, it's MediaMD.txt.
Yeah, exactly. It's all those terrible shows that you tried to get me to watch from MediaMD. It's very relatable, and I really like the idea that Lucy is clearly comes across as a horror movie buff, because obviously the Otherverse is a kind of horror trope aware kind of set of stories and worlds. So the idea that Lucy is horror trope aware, leading to why she maybe seems quite competent in this world and is clearly kind of taking to it pretty well, I think is great. And I hope that continues to be the case. She comes up against horror tropes and she's like, no, we shouldn't split up and go our separate ways. We should all stick together or whatever, right? I think that's hilarious.
Yeah, you're right. She has sort of been the consistent voice of reason in how they're engaging with actual literal monsters.
Yep.
So yeah, you can kind of see, especially if horror is her reference for all this stuff, you can see why she's so much more cautious than the other two, who are maybe leaning more into fairy tales in Avery's case.
Yes, exactly. And it's great because the stories are horror trope aware. So having a character who also is horror trope aware is just works perfectly. I love it as an idea. Yeah,
absolutely. There's also a really interesting bit where Lucy dives into why she likes this particular movie or kind of doesn't. And it really sort of starts to nail in a bit more this idea. She has this very punitive, eye for an eye sense of justice. One of the things she criticizes this movie for not doing is she says the killer doesn't suffer enough before he dies. If you're going to do this stuff, you need to have just as bad things.
Punitive justice.
Happen to you. Yeah, it's a very understandable but very harsh sense of justice, and we're going to see a bit more of it I think later in the chapter, but I think that's going to be interesting. That's something this story I think has been touching on a lot, and as we maybe get to the end point of the story is once we've solved the mystery, you've kind of got to decide what happens then, right?
And what happens to the what do you call it, the perpetrator?
Yeah, exactly. It's okay, once we figured out who killed the Carmine Beast or did whatever other awful things happen between now and then, they're going to kind of have to decide what to do with them. And I'm going to start to try and look for what Avery and Verona's opinions on this sort of stuff might be, because that could be a potential source of conflict.
Yeah, definitely.
Avery, just thinking on Verona's dad, Avery I think is going to be a lot less punitive in the way, exactly. Or less harsh anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see. I suspect Avery is going through some transformative experiences of her own in these chapters. So
yes, Avery, as we know her, may not be relevant in a couple of chapters.
Well, I hope that's not to that extent. Jesus Christ. These chapters are a lot of us meeting characters that we have been hoping to meet for a while, with the first of those being Booker.
Yeah.
Who we finally get to meet, and he's just as great as I think we were all hoping that he would be.
Yeah, he really lives up to the hype, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's just so aggravating how short this conversation is. Like, there's the deadline because Booker, he says he's working like 10 till midnight, which is a crazy shift. I don't know what job he does.
And then he has a thing at dawn as well, right? Or he said like really early in the morning at sunrise or whatever.
God, being at college.
That's not my experience. I mean, I didn't go to college. I went to university. I know you had a college experience, Elliot, but like for me, it was much the opposite, where I was very, very lazy. Didn't do anything. Played Dota all day.
Yeah, fair enough. Mine much more relates to the idea of doing something till midnight, not necessarily like work. Sure, like sometimes work, sometimes just drinking until midnight.
Until 2 a.m. I get, but
and then getting up at dawn. Anyway,
maybe that's what's happening. Maybe Booker was just off to play a game of Dota or go drinking and didn't want to, wanted a better excuse to stop talking to Lucy. Maybe he isn't as awesome as we thought.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, well, if he plays Dota.
Definitely. If he plays Dota. Only pieces of shit play Dota. That's a true fact.
You know what? Here's a bit of headcanon for everyone.
All right. Oh, you coming in with the hot predictions. Okay.
MOBAs in the other verse, I guarantee you 30% of the playing population is goblins.
Ah, that totally explains it. Because, the people who... And honestly, I mean, like, maybe just, like, people who play games in general. Like, I bet there's a certain type of goblin that just exists on, Xbox Live Arcade or whatever.
Yeah, the I fucked your mum goblin.
Yeah, exactly. And just exists to take a space where people are enjoying a hobby and make it miserable. And that's their whole jam. I can totally see that.
Anyway, sorry. Yes, back to Booker. So aside from just the deadline of this weird shift at work and all that, he's also like Alyssa, his girlfriend, kind of keeps coming in, and Lucy has what I would describe as a very unfair but completely understandable sort of annoyance at like her interrupting the time she has with Booker. Yeah. It's totally irrational, but like I totally would feel the same.
Yes, it's exacerbated by the fact that she has very high opinions of Booker as well, and so therefore, whoever he ends up dating has to live up to her impossibly high standards. So it's really like there's really a few hurdles for Alyssa to jump through before she'll earn Lucy's respect, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's just what happens when you care that much about a family member.
Yeah.
The crushing part of this whole Booker conversation is how much she actually does kind of let him in. It's like the first time we actually see her really let someone in, and it's just such a short call by its nature, and it was just like, it's crushing.
Yeah. I think, again, obviously last chapter with Lucy was really about the kind of societal exhaustion that she's feeling, and you still do feel it here. Like, she's just so on edge. There's no downtime for her. Even this kind of relaxing thing, she can't let herself be fully relaxed in. And obviously, like, it sucks because the world of the practice that she's entered into means that that's going to be even more true going forward.
Yeah. Like she talks about always sort of needing to have her teeth out, and that's possibly literally true in the world that she's now entered. Like, it's going to take that problem and dial it up to 11.
Yeah.
And you're right, this is prevalent right throughout the start of this chapter in particular. Like, there's a bit where Heather sort of laughs at her at the start because of how, like, how into the movie she is. And, like, Heather's doing it in a kind of, like, loving, like, fun way. But Lucy's first reaction is, thinking Heather is making fun of her and is being mean. And, like, that's where her mind goes first, even with someone she's as close to as Heather. Like, so it's just, you can really see it from the get-go. And she sort of talks to Booker about this. There's Lucy describes it as she's always going to have her teeth out by default, and people kind of need to look past that.
Yes.
Whereas Booker sort of takes a bit, or seems to take a bit more of a stance of, like, give people a chance first and then, get your teeth out if they prove themselves to be pieces of shit.
Yeah. And I don't know. I think they're both valid approaches. I mean, Lucy's obviously had enough shit piled on her that, you can't really criticize her for being especially wary.
No, exactly. But like I think Booker's point that he tries to sort of make to her is like hopefully for her in the long run, it's better if she lets her guard down and forms those bonds. Like that's basically what he's saying. And if we think about like what was being said about the way the Kenneteers were all sort of trending to other because they were a bit isolated, like I think maybe Booker has a bit of a point.
Yeah, he's bang on, for sure.
At the same time, like it's not like she's like this for no reason. So like,
it's interesting thinking about all of these things that like, and the fact that Lucy is so on edge. It made me put it into this context of like, we learned in, I think it was the last chapter, that at least goblins in this universe have the tendency to like pile on to people who are already down, right? They have the tendency to kick people while they're down. And that might be true for others as well. And I also kind of connected this with the thought that it seems like a lot of the stronger emotional, taxing stuff that the trio has faced so far has disproportionately affected Lucy. And it made me connect it with the idea that like maybe because she's so on edge already, she's kind of more karmically, in air quotes, more likely to have things happen that push her further to that edge. Like, I'm not saying it's intentional, but it even could be intentional where the Ken and others are trying to push her further along the path, right? With Goblin teaching her these curses, or Faye setting up situations to like frustrate and alienate her, or even John maybe threatening her with a gun to keep her on edge in their first encounter. It seems like she's more so being kept on edge, and it might even be intentional to fuck with her, which is pretty horrifying.
Yeah, so you're sort of saying, like, I guess being on edge like that is kind of, for want of a better phrase, like her pattern or something. Like it's what the universe is perhaps like karmically trying to do to her because that was sort of what was already happening.
Yeah,
like, or so even the universe is just being a giant piece of shit, basically.
Well, yeah, kind of maintaining that as her status quo, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which would be shit, but I don't know. Could be true. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because part of me also just thinks that she's the only sane person in this trio who's dealing like the things they've gone through are objectively anxiety-inducing.
Yes, for sure.
And she's just kind of the only one who's reacting appropriately.
Yeah.
But I think, the Otherverse has proven itself as this kind of world where, like, the Doylist and Watsonian interpretations are kind of, doing each other.
Yeah, so, they're enmeshed, yeah.
Like, I guess, yeah, like, it could be both, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say.
Classic.
Yeah,
could be both. It's always could be both, I think. Yeah, we'll see. So Lucy and Booker continue to have this conversation with no easy answers.
Yeah, I mean, it just sucks, and I do think Booker handles the conversation very well.
Yes,
like in my opinion, I really like the moment where Lucy kind of explains to him what she thinks went on with Paul, and he doesn't let her have any doubts. Like, he sort of realizes that she's been holding on to this for years, and closure is absolutely what she needs. So he just sort of irons it out. He's like, no, wait, your interpretation is my interpretation. There's no way that's not it. It just is it.
Yeah, we can't have come to this interpretation and it not be true, basically, is what he says.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's really important that he emphasizes that point, because otherwise there's always going to be that part of her head Lucy talks about where it's just spinning and like kind of congesting. And Booker just sort of, I think, understands that, this isn't going to make the problem go away, but I think it's an important first step to be like, no, that's what it is.
Yeah, you're right.
We need to accept it. Well, not accept it, but like accept that it's reality.
Except that's what happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does do very well. I wanted to read out this specific quote, which had a strong reaction to me, which was where he says, "Some stuff only feels heavy because we get stuck out on our own, nothing to use as a measuring stick to figure out how big the problem is in front of us." Which I really like as just general advice. But my first reaction to it was like, well, this isn't true for them as practitioners, right? But then I thought about it again and I'm like, I don't know, like maybe it is. I mean, we'll get into Nicolette Belanger a bit more these chapters, obviously, who's being set up as this overarching antagonist for the next few chapters, arcs, whatever. But it's possible that when they do eventually meet her, or if not her, other practitioners, there will be a chance for them to actually get some sense of connection to other practitioners that isn't going to be damaging to them. I don't know. It seems unlikely, but it might be true that actually just having other people around that you can help use to contextualize your practitioner experiences might be what they need.
Yeah, well, I suppose, Miss has always sort of taught us that one of the big dangers of all the other practitioners in the world is how networked they are. And that's probably maybe in part because they're able to support each other that way. Yeah, I don't know. I actually originally wanted to try and apply this advice to Kenneth and be like, oh, Kenneth's just trying to sit on its own outside the world and it needs to connect more. But actually everything Miss has said about practitioners makes me think that isn't true. So, yeah, I don't know. It just makes me think these three need to go to that school and or at least send one of them. See what the rest of practitioners are like, because that's the only way they're going to be able to find someone with a stick that's even remotely comparable to theirs.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this is what we're going to get, right? We're going to get each of them having their Miss gift play out, right? We've got Avery's. I mean, Lucy's was the gun. I mean, the soda can gun, or the weapon ring, I guess. So hers was already kind of played out, but at least for Avery and Verona, having their Miss gifts play out and see what happens. I don't know. Based on how Avery's one is going, maybe that's not the right thing to hope for.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it'll be interesting to see where we end up with Nicolette, as you sort of touched on. Like, is she... I mean, they obviously try to not be enemies with her in this chapter, and it doesn't work out.
Doesn't go anywhere
in this or the next chapter. But we know nothing about her at all. Like, I don't know. I can't wait to find out more about Nicolette and see what. Wait, maybe they don't have to be enemies. I don't know.
Maybe Nicolette Belanger doesn't even exist
in these next two chapters. So
she might not even exist, Elliot. Like,
well, yeah, I saw that. I saw that part.
Okay, we'll get to that later.
Let's put our tinfoil on when we get there, maybe.
This conversation with Booker is great. There's this moment where Lucy kind of breaks the dam and starts to let Booker in, talking about this problem that she's facing. And it again, I just kind of want to think, like, what would it look like if she's actually able to push past the disbelief that is natural when the uninitiated find out about this stuff, and see if she can let Booker in completely? Like, how would that go? I mean, I don't think it will happen, but man, I just want them to have more support,
Yeah, I mean, that's the conundrum with this stuff, because on the one hand, like, I mean, we're constantly yelling at these three to let people in and get more support. But then on the other hand, don't do that to these poor people. They don't know about this world, and you should keep it that way.
Lucy explicitly calls out that, the idea of getting them kind of enmeshed and tangled up in it.
Yeah.
As a thing that she really wants to avoid, which, fair enough,
Yeah, I mean, and that's the shittiness of this situation is you can't lean on these people for support, because to do so would endanger them. It's basically like the Spider-Man identity dilemma.
Yeah. I just think Booker would be a great person to have in your corner, fully initiated, right? Like,
yeah, you'd think so.
Yeah, I will see. Hey, maybe that'll happen. You never know. I guess so. This conversation wraps up. Luce heads out to meet with the others, and they basically start to talk Miss through their plan.
Yeah. I mean, but before Lucy does go up and meet with the others, though, I want to call out this bit where she's leaving. Like, she sort of tells her mum she's going out, and there's sort of a bit of a negotiation here, because Jazz is kind of like, no, it's like the middle of the night. No, and Lucy's like, I'm not grounded, and it's like, I don't give a shit if you're grounded. It's like 8 p.m. at night. You just want to leave, like, on a school night. Yeah. It just. I mean, the crushing thing here is Jazz is kind of like, I think you need me to be a parent. I want to make you stay. And Lucy then basically thinks, I kind of hope you force me to stay as well. Like, I need to do this, but I don't want to. And it's, again, just crushing. It reminded me of Gabe in 1.Z, how, like, you kept being like, Gabe, don't sign up for this fucking ritual. And he kept having, like, near calls with everything. And then he still did it. And I felt the same with Lucy here. I was like, no, Lucy, just stay with your mum and Aunt Heather. Put on that stupid movie again. Make them watch it. Yeah,
go for a second time around. Maybe it'll work better. Yeah. But alas, she heads off. So they call Miss, and I mean, okay, we should talk about this plan a bit. But there's this one line that Miss says, not specifically in reference to this, but I think it does sum it up pretty well. Where Miss says, there are possible ways forward that are simpler. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, Miss, Why is this thing? So their plan is, as I understand it, Elliot, get Avery to the paths, because if Avery goes to the paths, she'll basically be able to effectively travel better and help them travel more easily to the site of this final night of Reagan's Hungry Choir ritual, right? That's more or less the plan. That's a bad plan. Like,
it's a shit plan. It's a real bad plan. I think we talked about this at the end of last week's episode. Like, just go to where Reagan is.
It's the plan that is the equivalent of like, oh, we need to catch a ride, so what should we do? Oh, I know, we'll kidnap somebody and force them at gunpoint to drive us there, right? It's the equivalent of this plan where, like, there are 3 or 4 other options you could take, you know, a bus or a car or a taxi. I mean, like, yeah, they're expensive, but ask John for some money or something, you know? Like, I don't know. I know none of these all have their own faults, but I do feel like these 3 aren't thinking of the non-practitioner solutions. And Miss also isn't helping. I think Miss clearly is just kind of pushing Avery into becoming a finder a bit here.
Yeah, absolutely. I was sort of going to bring that up. It's just, yeah, like the way Miss barely questions at all what is, I think we could agree, a stupid way to go about trying to get there. Yeah. I think I want to talk more about Miss with the reveal at the end of the chapter and what she might be thinking here, because I absolutely think that it's not an accident that she's just kind of like, hey, Avery, go be a finder.
Yeah.
But there is that interesting bit, because originally they actually are arguing about who's going to go. Like, Verona's not in contention because she's the smartest one there. But Lucy wants to go because she feels this responsibility. Like, you know, again, she has to be the one to do it, which is sort of very her. But what sort of settles it is Miss is kind of like, no, whoever does this, like, this is a big ritual and it will sort of establish what kind of practitioner you are.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting, because what kinds of practitioner are there? Like, do we know of any apart from like Augur, Heartless, and Finder? Like, it just seems like Avery's kind of picking a career when she only knows about the careers of, like, you know, janitor, doctor, and lawyer. She doesn't realize that there's like 1,000 other jobs out there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I guess we don't, right? We don't really.
Yeah, wait. Yeah, I you know, Miss says you can career change, essentially. But it's like hard, because your first big ritual kind of tells the spirits, hey, this is the type of practitioner I am. And
what was Charles? He was like a summoner or something, right?
Yeah, he made others, basically.
So they do know of some other options, but yeah, it does seem like Avery is like, I don't know, maybe this is a bit mean to Avery, but it feels like she's like not a 5-year-old, but someone young being like, when I grow up, I'm going to be a blah. And Miss is like, yeah. Let me force you into signing this binding contract to become that when you grow up. Like, no, that's not an appropriate thing to do to a 13-year-old, you know?
Yeah, because like the origin of this thought for me was, I wonder what type of practitioner Lucy or Verona is going to be. And then I was sort of like, I don't really know anything about any of the kinds of practitioners. Why is Avery picking one already?
Yeah, totally.
And I think this is going to come back to Miss putting people in positions, which is something she's very mindful of. But we'll get to that later. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that they make this call that Avery needs to do this, because this is going to kind of be her job. And I mean, she didn't have a good first day.
Yeah, first day on the job, not a success. Yes. So as they're preparing to send Avery into this ritual, Nicolette Belanger, in air quotes, makes another appearance through a number of animals that she sends at the trio.
Yes, it's basically Nicolette and her happy tree friends making an appearance.
Exactly. Again, bit suspicious of this whole Nicolette Belanger thing, because there's this one line, the one line Miss makes reference to her, you know, in this chapter is where they're asking how old she is. Like, is she actually an 8-year-old that we're about to fuck with? And Miss says, if it is Nicolette Belanger, she's older than you by you three by several years. If it was someone younger, they wouldn't have the talent, blah, blah, blah. It's a lot of like conditional language. I don't know. I don't think that's been 100% the case across all the times we've talked about Nicolette Belanger. But again, just like, it doesn't seem like it's not what it first appears, can I just say?
Isn't it?
I don't know. I feel like it's not. I feel like it's just not. Like, there are bits here that don't feel like they quite line up correctly to me.
I mean, I'm willing to buy. I don't think we've been given any evidence that makes me question it yet. I mean, I could just be missing it, but I'm willing to believe that it's just creepy ogre girl lady. I think the thing that jumped out to me here was this bit where Miss mentions that, you know, when Gilly kind of scared her off by being a very like scary fairy, he sort of, one of the things is she had to forget the particulars. That was part of the deal. And I just sort of realized when that was part of the deal, that's the third deal I can think of that has involved someone forgetting as part of the deal. Right. Like, obviously, you have the whole thing with the wolf. One with Louise. Louise did that in the prologue. Like, that's sort of at least three now. I'm at this stage...
the forgetfulness of people who interact with the Hungry Choir, like when people are erased by the Hungry Choir, you're right. That seems to be a recurring theme.
Yeah, so it's just led me now to be convinced, like, say two people teamed up to kill the Carmine Beast. Couldn't they just make a deal to forget they did it afterwards? And then they can actually honestly, because almost everyone has answered the, like, did you do it thing with a qualifier of, like, not as far as I'm aware, because they say, oh, I don't want to get, you know, in trouble for actually having done it accidentally, and the spirits call me out on that. Yeah. But if you made a deal and actually forgotten, then you can say things like, not as far as I'm aware, and it's true.
Yeah.
So at this point, I'm like 99% convinced that is what the culprits have done.
Yeah, you're right. There has been a lot of forgetting things, hasn't there? Almost
and
certainly
it's such a good way to skirt the like you can't lie like thing.
Interesting. Yeah, we'll see. I like that theory. Can we talk about this little argument where Verona and Avery are arguing about both wanting to have Alpy as a familiar?
Yes.
Like, Verona has a good point, but Avery is clearly just like jealous. And even from Lucy's perspective, she kind of realizes this is just a silly, like, little girl argument.
It feels like a petty middle school love triangle, doesn't it? It's so good.
It's funny as heck.
Like, once again, Lucy is the only person wearing big girl shoes in this trio, where she's just kind of like eye rolling at them because, you know, I can't remember exactly the context, but Avery just has this line to Verona where she's like, you know, it's also about personality. So good.
Oh, Avery, you goofball.
But the other thing I really want to talk about from this little bit here as well. So obviously, Nicolette comes at them with her happy tree friends, and Lucy uses the nettle wisp. You know what I need to start doing? As well as making like an inventory like spreadsheet, we need like one sort of crossed off because or
what's been used.
Although I suppose is glamour like specific to each one, or is it kind of these are different ways to use it?
I feel like there were specific types of glamours, weren't they? Maybe not. I don't know.
No, because I think they're like I don't know. Anyway, because I think don't they get more? I don't know if it's specific or if it's like you can use one glamour for every application. Anyway, so Lucy uses the nettle wisp sort of defense thing that they learnt from Marusika. But she does it with this, to quote Miss, interesting blend of fairy magic with goblin intent. And like I guess this sort of ties back to her thoughts on the movie. Like she sort of charms this thing with the idea of if they hurt us, hurt them back 3 times as much. But this idea of mixing fairy magic and goblin intent, I think we harped on a lot about how they're kind of opposites. And like, it feels like this might be an important line. I don't know. It just really jumped out to me as something that seemed crucial.
Because those two things shouldn't blend.
Yeah, like they're sort of opposites. I don't know exactly. I don't have the, yes, like I get what this means, but it feels like a line that'll come back. Like maybe it relates to the stuff Booker was talking about with the sort of be nice, but then mess them up if they mess with you type thing. Like,
interesting.
Like, you know, she's got this ring on and it's like if they touch her, then they get hurt, like, you know, so much more back. Like, I don't know. Like, it just really speaks to that kind of sense of justice Lucy has, but it's this idea of it being a mix of fairy and goblin. You know, it's like, lure them in with niceties, and then if they hurt you, like strike at them like a goblin, like blunt and forceful. I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know. We'll come back to this maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. We get confirmation that Miss is lost, which I think everyone had started predicting, but as I can tell in pale predictor. The first person to predict that was Fairlax. We had a few people predict it. Fairlax, Fubo. Lapsed Classicist really got it bang on, where they said Miss was a lost creature like what Avery might encounter on the path, possibly tied to some incarnation, which was just like 100% correct. So good work, Lapsed Classicist.
Yeah, that's really good, because we definitely saw people suggesting she was a lost practitioner a lot. I think guessing that she's I guess, how do things become lost? There's definitely a sense, like Miss says she might have been an echo or something, like maybe she was a practitioner who got lost and it just happened so long ago she doesn't remember.
Yeah.
Like, I think the thing with the lost is you maybe don't know.
Yeah, you don't really know what you were, but it does seem likely that she didn't have to have been a practitioner. Like the other lost things we meet don't seem to have been practitioners in a past life.
Although, maybe.
They could have been. Apart from Todd, who's clearly a weirdo.
But I mean, this is great. I'm so impressed so many people picked it, and then obviously, like, this is the perfect point for us to learn it because it sort of primes us for some of the people we're going to meet next chapter. And I think one of the things I want to touch on from that, like to sort of take some knowledge from 2.9 and apply it here. One of the things we learn from the others Avery meets is that they take a lot of their shape and form from the person visiting the path. Like the path itself obviously does, but I think there's a line where one of the others sort of implies that they too are filled in by the practitioner who's visiting. So, like, how much of Miss is of the person whose place she took? Like, that's such an interesting dynamic to me, is like she's Miss, but she's the version of Miss that is kind of empowered by this one specific practitioner whose place she nicked from reality. And what does that mean? Like, that's a very interesting sort of identity crisis to be having constantly, I imagine.
Yeah, I wonder. And does that potentially mean that whoever Miss is, like, infected with the humanity of is maybe potentially going to be relevant to the story if that comes up too much?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I think it's just like, it'd be interesting to sort of know what parts of her, like how much of the Miss that we know is an ex-practitioner and how much does that matter? Yeah,
because she does seem to have practitioner-esque kind of knowledge, but maybe that is just because she's an other. I don't know.
Yeah, she says she like went through like the Forest Ribbon Trail and some others just on instinct, which is such insanity to me that actually now that you've said that, I'm more willing to believe that it's knowledge she absorbed from the practitioner, like when the stairwell web was formed, because that's so insane to me that she did it on instinct.
Yeah,
but I think as well the big thing here for Miss really is she has no spot in the universe, and so the universe is like conspiring to give her a role, and that's why she's so afraid of things like the Hungry Choir and stuff. Like she's kind of a fugitive from the universe in a way. It makes sense now why she's kind of the de facto leader of Kennet, because she's an expert at dodging the universe.
Yeah. I wonder if she became that as well as to try and carve that as a role for herself, like leading this group.
Well, I mean, that was a theory I sort of brought up in my live reads. Is she? She's kind of set up now. She's the leader, essentially, the chaperone of these three practitioners of the town now. Obviously, I think if we're looking at Mrs. trying to like take a role for herself, the Carmine Beast seems like an obvious one. Like she's like, making her the murderer who wants to take the Carmine Beast's position seems like an obvious motive.
Yeah, definitely.
I wonder if it's not, like, to take another step, that's going to be a violent and bloody thing, but the whole situation also let her awaken some practitioners. I wonder if actually her plan is to maybe like usurp these three, or like, I think the thing I said in my live read is, does she want to become like the Lord of Kennet or something, like,
yeah, or maybe even like becoming a familiar or something would be a goal for her. I don't know.
It could be why she's pushing Avery to be a finder.
Yeah, true. Setting up these three as fairly weak practitioners that she can become a familiar of, that has enough agency to, do the things that she wants to still be doing. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, she's definitely got she set up a mentor role over
Yeah.
the three of them. So yeah, I could definitely see that. I don't know. Like, it's definitely, you got to kind of, Miss sets herself up here as someone who is obsessed with roles and where people stand, and I can't help but then start to assess all these roles and things that are in the story and try to see how she might be trying to manipulate pieces.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's is that everything about 2.8? Anything else you want to say here before we jump into 2.9?
They shouldn't be doing this.
Well, too late for that, because we jump into 2.9, the Forest Ribbon Trail. Avery is sent to the Forest Ribbon Trail and meets her opossum companion.
Yeah, and it's like, I hope it's okay for me to just sort of say here, this is the most pacty version, or the most pacty chapter of Pale so far, in my opinion. Like, if you haven't read Pact, this is the sort of stuff I loved in Pact. Not just, the insane setting, but the way this chapter fucks with your mind.
Yeah.
Like this, if you haven't reread this chapter, please go and do so with the Snowdrop twist in mind.
Yeah.
It's so good. It changes everything. Like, this was like being back on Deep Impact for me, like going back to read the chapter a second time and just having my mind blown about 10 times.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It is good, isn't it? This really is a headfuck kind of chapter. It's fun to have one of these be back. There's so much that happens. I actually don't think we'll have that much to talk about for this chapter, just because the chapter kind of explains itself a lot, and it's a chapter designed for rereading. So, like, a lot of the stuff that we would say about it, people will probably have already, come to their own conclusions of.
Yeah, this is going to be one of those weird ones. Like, you tend to assume when you sit down to do these podcasts that there'll be a correlation between how much you love a chapter and how long you talk about it. I think this is going to be one of those chapters where that's not the case, because if that was true, we'd probably be here for another 4 hours. I love this chapter. But weirdly, I think it's such a self-contained little masterpiece that we may not actually talk about it for that long.
Yeah. I think I want to run through a few specific things, rules for the Forest Ribbon Trail, because I think I read this for the first time and I was like, yeah, I'll get most of it. And man, there was so much stuff that I just realized I hadn't remembered or like missed the details of. Like, yeah, what the 5 objects are.
I had the 2.3 bonus notes with the Forest Ribbon Trail description open on my second monitor as I was reading this, and I was constantly referring back. Like, those who followed my live read would know there was one part where, like, the bit where Avery turns around, I was confused for ages, and I had to sort of go back because I missed the bit where it said with the skull, you've got to turn around.
Yeah, exactly.
I only read the part that was like, you need to hold it in front of you. So I was waiting for her to grab the boy and hold him in front of her. And then when she turned around, I was like, what's going on?
What's she doing? Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I think the bonus bit and the chapter play off each other so well.
Yes. I think the part that's going to be the most important is what the woven object and the timepiece are. So the woven object is to do with blindness and being ensnared. And the timepiece is about waiting and losing time and losing things that are valuable to you. And those are going to come up a lot in the finale. The other thing being about the detour, if you aren't going to do a good bargain, which you need your boon companion for, because an element of the bargain is that you don't get to leave and you have to put your boon companion in that position for you. If you aren't going to bargain with the wolf, you need to take the detour past the branch with no ribbon tied to it. And there are a few items there that will come up. Like the branch without a ribbon, and there's a rope that will catch you, and etc. etc. Actually, this rope, now that I've reread this and I'm like, oh, this rope, if you bring the rope with you, you get an unusual but familiar means of transportation. So that's basically exactly what they need. So hopefully if they get the rope and Avery gets out, that will solve their transport problems.
I totally disagree, because the only solution that is acceptable at this point in the story to me is the one that lets Avery get out with Snowdrop.
But that is the detour. The detour, you can't get out with your boon companion. Is that intrinsic
to the detour? I thought you had to take one of the 3 objects with you.
Oh, true. Sorry. Yeah, I think you don't have to take one of them. I think you can just take any of them on the detour, but maybe I'm wrong. The third object being your boon companion that you can keep. Maybe you're right.
Yeah, you're right. I suppose the one item limit probably doesn't apply to the detour, because what's the wolf going to do about it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, whatever. Anyway, so The other twist, obviously, I mean, we're going in full spoilers. Everyone should know the Snowdrop twist. If you don't, go back and...
It's so good. Reread it, please.
Yeah.
Like, just for yourself, because it took everything I had not to just put every single Snowdrop line in this script to quote.
Yes, they're pretty
because
great,
all of
aren't
them are completely recontextualized.
Yeah, it was my favorite thing to go back through the Reddit comments on this chapter afterwards and be like, "Oh my god, yeah, that's what Snowdrop was saying. Oh yeah, and that."
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right, cool. Should we dive into it? So yeah, we meet Snowdrop, who is the opossum boon companion, and they're so great. Like, they're so endearing. The first read through, you're like, "Who's this?" And then you kind of grow to love them by the end, and then the second read through, you absolutely fall in love with them.
Yeah, I loved Snowdrop a lot the first time through, and then the second time, knowing she's always saying the opposite of what she means, I loved her 1,000 times more. She was always, I mean, yeah, it's so good. I mean, okay, before we just start fawning over Snowdrop forever, I just wanted to go back as well, because the opening of this chapter with the whole like Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz, Majora's Mask sort of nature of this world in our minds, like the way Avery kind of twirls in and falls into it
down, yeah, totally.
is very, very appropriate to all those sorts of stories. And It's one of those other details where, again, reading it the second time, you're like, oh yeah,
yeah.
Like, but anyway, sorry, yes, back to Snowdrop.
I think the one that I'll pull out is when Snowdrop says, "That's so lame," the opossum girl said. "You look so uncool." Which, I mean, it's a perfect example of the way that Snowdrop is so endearing the second time round, because Snowdrop is just obsessed and in love with Avery, and it's great.
Yeah, she's saying Avery's, let's be honest, lame and uncool witch's outfit is actually awesome. Yeah, we need to get Snowdrop out of here and
I know
familiarized with Avery like stat.
The problem is, we'll talk about the idea of this teaching a moral to Avery, but if the moral of this place is that you can't save everybody, Snowdrop is the example of that, right? And that's what scares me.
No, but we learnt it with the other possum.
Yeah, sure, now. That one that clearly they didn't want to save, so that didn't really impart a lesson.
I think my favorite line, like I've also limited myself to just pulling the one, my favorite Snowdrop line with the twist in mind might be when they're talking about like how Avery got here, and Snowdrop basically says to her, "Oh, you're so prepared for this crap."
Yeah.
Which, like, I actually think I brought that up in my live read, and I was like, why has Snowdrop said this? This is weird. Like, it doesn't fit. And now with the twist in mind, it's like, she's scolding Avery for coming in here completely unprepared, which is very fair.
Yes. The one I really liked was when the other possum says, "Snowdrop here is lying to you," the voice said. "She has been from the beginning. You read that you didn't need to close your eyes, so why are your eyes closed?" And it's so great that, like, Snowdrop has to lie, and this thing obviously is telling the truth almost all the time. Or all the time, if not all the time.
Yeah, I think it is telling the truth all the time, like based on my second read through, which has some interesting implications for what's going to happen after this chapter.
Yes. But the thing is, like, the fact that Snowdrop has to lie is such an exploitable weakness that this other possum thing so easily pulls out and like teases at, and it just is so juicy. Fuck.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because like, in a way, it's no better, or it's just as much of a weakness as always having to tell the truth, right? Because having to tell the exact opposite of the truth is just as limiting, if not maybe more limiting, because she always has to say the opposite of what she means. I mean, the interesting implication for that to me is others aren't meant to be able to lie, right?
No.
So if Snowdrop gets out of the forest ribbon trail, like say Avery does save her or whatever, is Snowdrop, is that still going to be a thing? Like, is that limited to the forest ribbon trail, or is that, because that would be a very interesting thing to take into the rest of the world.
This one creature that always lies as opposed to never lying.
Yeah, like used sparingly and cleverly, that could be a huge asset. If the default assumption is that others have to tell the truth, and you've got one who always does the opposite, like that feels incredibly powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point. I wonder. It's something I hadn't really thought of, but that's dependent on them getting Snowdrop out, which isn't going to happen, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of steps before we can worry about that being a factor.
Yeah, I can't think of a way that Avery has the opportunity to get Snowdrop out and doesn't. Like,
I've got my fingers crossed that Nicolette got Snowdrop out, and we're going to have to mount a rescue mission.
A rescue op, maybe. We'll see. Would you rather have Snowdrop or Avery escape from this situation?
Don't make me choose.
Oh no! Oh no! So yeah, Avery kind of continues on. Actually, yeah, we've touched on how this is a huge mindfuck. I love it. Like, it's so great. Like, we haven't had anything that's this level of intensely mindfuck, and it's just so much fun.
Yeah, I agree. I love this stuff. I love how there are so many rules. Like, as we sort of already touched on, like, I was jumping back and forth between 2.9 and the 2.3 extra material to try and follow what was going on. But there's just enough like interpretation and variation in the path that you can't quite be 100% sure. Like, what I love is even with all these rules, there were still multiple points on my first read through where I was like, okay, wait, so what is this then?
Yeah.
It's so much fun that despite all the rules, there's still a lot open to questioning as you're going. Like,
there's so many rules that even though you know them all, and Avery clearly knows them all, it's still so confusing, even when you follow them 100%. Like, so we go along, and Avery kind of has this moment where she outsmarts the basket, and she kind of outsmarts the cat skull, and she's doing very well, even though she doesn't really quite get everything that's going on. It's just like there's a whole lot of stuff that even though Avery is going very well, it still is so confusing.
Yeah, and I think Snowdrop's definitely a part of that. Like, I think the second time through, part of why it was so much clearer is because when you know that Snowdrop's always lying, what she's saying makes a lot more sense. But the way she opens up, it casts doubt on everything, which obviously is exactly what Avery needs. But yeah, and then obviously we meet this other possum who wants to get swapped for Snowdrop. And it's funny, like, again, this is one where you've got to reread it because I kind of assumed this other possum was lying or being deceitful. And I think it is to some degree, but I think everything it says seems to be 100% true. Which, like, just the bits where Snowdrop and this other possum are both talking to Avery kind of at the same time reads so differently when you've kind of flipped what you think they might be doing the first time through.
Yeah. The fact that this other possum isn't just always lying also means that it's not a possum. So something funky is going on with it. Makes it so much creepier.
Isn't it a woman holding a possum in her hands and the possum talks with an adult voice? Like, it's clearly fucked up.
Clearly something wonky. I want to talk about how well Avery actually is doing. Like, shit, she does so much better than I think I would in this situation.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she doesn't put it all together, but she has so many, like, not even guesses, but just kind of estimates that are so bang on. Like, oh, there's someone out of place. It's probably an invader. Like, she kind of realizes that she should be doing the opposite of what Snowdrop says, even though she doesn't quite connect that until later. Like, a bunch of things where, damn, she's like really kicking ass here.
Yeah, she does. The fact that I was constantly behind her shows like how good she was doing relative to how well I would do. I mean, like, Avery relates this a lot in the chapter to sort of like her sports ball skills. And I really like that because we've seen in her head how she kind of is with sports and that mentality. And so it was really cool to see, that kind of dialed up to 100. Like, this is such a cool extension of that. It's obviously a whole nother level, but it's, thinking on her feet, like adapting, reading the opposition and her allies even. Like, she does such a good job of doing all these things that are inherent skills for like team sports, and she's adapting them to, this very normal situation.
Yeah. Great work, Avery. So yeah, she continues on and she has an encounter with Todd, the creepy dad who bites his nails.
Normal guy Todd.
Yep, just a regular dude.
Nothing to see here.
No, I love the way that tone and is kind of conveyed here. Like, God, Wildboy makes it all so creepy with this Todd guy who's just kind of a guy with a gun, but then he talks about like laying eggs in people and how he hasn't been a human for so long, or even like interacted with a human for so long that he forgets how their pain works. Like, shit, man, Todd, fuck off.
Yeah, I think it's funny because sort of right from the get-go, he's one of the scariest because you've got like a kid who's got like rats jammed in his face. You've got this talking hand possum. You've got the giant doll, and then it's just like a normal guy in a suit
And
hanging out with
Todd.
them. It's like, okay, that's not right. He's the creepiest.
Todd is even such a random guy name, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, hi, I'm Todd. I was like, no, okay, I don't trust this at all.
Yeah, something creepy's going on. So there's this bit where Snowdrop is talking about bringing one thing, which is obviously a lie, and then she brings the basket at the end. Can Snowdrop just bring an extra thing? Is that her ability?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't
So
quite
yeah,
get it.
her boon is that she can also carry
Another
the
thing.
thing. Is my interpretation, as well as her other property of never telling the truth.
Yeah.
She can also deceive the path by bringing an item of her own.
So that would mean that theoretically Avery could get out with two things. So if Avery does get Snowdrop, maybe they can also get the rope or something.
I think not. What it means is that you can like be holding both and the path won't shit on you. I think there was an implication that if Avery was trying to hold both, like, isn't it when she picks up
the coin, she drops the basket.
The basket thing, it just pops off her belt. So I think it's like you can't have more than one.
Literally can't take more than one.
Yeah, but like, you know, if you bring an opossum, you can.
Cool. Seems good. Good.
Sort
good
of.
perk.
I assume you can only use one for the negotiation if, unlike Avery, you get to actually do that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, it would let you sidestep two of the like
downsides.
things you have to do and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about this other possum, the evil possum, let's call it. I feel bad for them. Like, obviously they're bad. Like, obviously they're evil, right? Like, they're going to do evil things. Based on what Snowdrop says, it seems like they're going to do evil, horrifying things. But still, they're literally begging for their freedom. Like, I can't help but feel bad for them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, they talk about how awful it is to be lost, and you're kind of like, yes, okay, you're like a terrible monster and stuff, but like, this does seem like a pretty shitty life. I don't know. It's hard to blame this evil possum for like making the plays that it does. I would do the same if I was capable and I was in that situation.
Yeah, and it does try to be helpful. Like, it tells her where the coin is, right? Like, it does a few things that are like genuinely good faith acts of like, please, I'll help you, let me out.
Yeah, and it seems to always tell the truth. So assuming it was telling the truth in all the things it was going to swear to help her with, like, they were pretty good things. I mean, you know,
killing Todd.
Like, Snowdrop heavily implies that it's like, yes, she will do these nice things for you and then be like a bane on existence for the world or whatever. But yeah, like, it's hard not to feel a bit sorry for this like clearly evil possum that is in what seems to be the worst situation ever.
Yeah. I want to talk about the other line that this other evil possum brings up, which is the fact that there's a moral here, right? Which is something that we see a bit, but we don't really get it like, most of the stuff in this chapter we get explained by the end of the chapter. It's got a few reveals and it kind of explains itself, but not the moral. Like, the one that is possibly revealed by the creepy evil possum is that it's something to do with like learning that she can't save everybody. But that doesn't seem to eventuate by the end of this chapter, at least. It might be that, and maybe, you know, Snowdrop won't be saved because of that, but it might be something like that. But we just don't really know what yet.
I think the way the evil possum frames it at one point is that not saving people is kind of the second thing she has to face. It's the second reality she has to face. And I mean, so this bit, the quote you just sort of referenced, is sandwiched in between the bit where this other possum is really begging and just being like, I think it actually says like, please, I'm begging you. And that's when Avery just kind of tosses the coin back at it.
Yeah.
So like, I think maybe here in this bit you've referenced, that is sort of the moral she's learning. She can't save everyone. She has to leave this in behind. Whereas like, maybe it's like each leg has a bit of a lesson in it. Like, so in the first one, I think this evil possum kind of teaches her, you know, the fact that this is Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz type stories, like isekai stories.
Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe there's a bit of a lesson or moral to the third leg as well that we will get to.
Sorry, it's just making me realize that what the evil possum says is when you figure out that first realization, there's another moral 2 steps down the path, right? Something, I think it's even that exact wording, which maybe makes me think that yes, each step of the path is a kind of extension of that moral. So step 1 is this is an Alice in Wonderland story. Step 2 is you can't save everybody. What's the step 3 of that, you know?
Yeah, I don't know how much they need to relate. Maybe it's just kind of this is this 3-act path, and each one has its own lesson. Yeah, it's a trilogy. I don't know. Like because the other thing, like Avery sort of leans into this whole "I need to be my confident best self" thing after she also sort of learns this lesson of "I can't save everyone." Maybe that is meant to be her third
lesson.
thing. Like maybe if she stands up to I don't know. This seems too simple, but maybe she just stands up to the wolf and puts it in its place, and is confident, doesn't hesitate. She will get a sort of power over it. I don't know. Now I really want to go back and look at all the times the wolf hits her, because I think it's when she's like looking away and hesitating. So I don't know. Maybe there's something there.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's just all it'll take is her to get confident and sort of beat down the wolf. With her words.
Yeah. Oh, physically. She's got a hockey stick. Why not?
Yeah, pequeño los dos.
Yeah, pequeño los dos, exactly. So Avery gets to the wolf, gets this final leg of the journey, and the wolf, of course, has the timepiece. And so Avery trades for the timepiece, but now the wolf is closest to the timepiece and can waste her time, but Snowdrop's holding the basket, and there's a lot of like switcheroos and double dealings and all kind of stuff. I did not follow it the first time at all, but that was true for most of this chapter, I think.
Yeah, I was about to say, this was one of the few parts of the chapter I think I understood, mostly because I'd given up on understanding all the details on my first read through.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. Like a lot of switcheroos. Like this is where a bunch of the twists all sort of hit us in very quick succession.
Yeah.
That have sort of been hanging over us the whole chapter.
Yeah. So we learned Snowdrop is a dirty, friendly liar and can also take something to the wolf. So Snowdrop has the basket. So then Snowdrop has the basket become the closest thing to the wolf. So then the wolf can blind Avery. So the wolf blinds Avery. But then Snowdrop gets kidnapped because the doll is actually Nicolette Belanger. And Nicolette Belanger steals Snowdrop. And now Snowdrop and the basket are gone. So now, therefore, the wolf can waste Avery's time again. But she's also blinded. So it really just goes badly very quickly.
Yeah, basically Avery gets the worst of both worlds for trying to be sneaky, thanks to Nicolette.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, yes, she seems pretty fucked at this stage.
Well, it seems possible to escape until we get to the next chapter, which I'll talk about in a moment as well, where it gets worse. But yeah, it's a rough situation. The problem is, without Snowdrop, she can't really negotiate with the wolf because you need the boon companion to take your place in that negotiation, right? Like, or she'll just be stuck here forever, basically, right?
Yeah, I mean, that is seemingly part of the deal you will have to strike is you have to stay forever, and then you sort of say, oh no, my boon companion's going to do that.
Yeah.
So unless Avery can make a deal with the wolf that involves letting her go, like, yes, exactly. And like, I feel like if it's even possible to get the wolf to let you go, it would have to be like a pretty insane deal, like I'll bring 10 other people to the Forest Ribbon Trail and you can have them, like, which is not the sort of deal Avery probably should be making.
Yeah. It seems like that the two options here are somehow get Snowdrop back and sacrifice her, or take the detour, right?
Yes, but I think the bonus bit, or the extra material for this week, basically seems to just be there to tell us that that's not an option.
Should we talk about that?
Or just sort of before we do, so assuming the evil possum was always not just telling the truth, but correct about everything, one of the things they mention is that, Avery won't be getting looked for till tomorrow afternoon, and that's when they like ring her phone, and the phone will just hear her and the wolf like crying, or her crying, the wolf probably not crying, although maybe.
Yeah.
That could be some sort of psychological tactic, I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's sort of like she's going to be here until at least tomorrow afternoon from the looks of it.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, I mean, I guess the timepiece, I'm kind of optimistically sort of sitting here thinking, oh, well, the reason they didn't go more specifically into her future is because the timepiece is going to mean she's here till tomorrow afternoon, but after then there's still hope.
Yeah. Yeah,
I don't know.
it's grim. Assuming that Bad Possum was telling the truth about everything, that means it's grim, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Grim
that
with
doesn't
two
seem to be
M's.
many ways out. Thanks to Nicolette, who
Yeah.
is, got her third win. She really didn't fuck around getting that third win. There
Yeah.
must have been like an hour between the loss of the Happy Tree Friends and the Dollface victory.
Yeah. Yeah. So Avery's pretty screwed. And then we get to End of the Trail, in which we all play a horrible game of Spot the Difference.
This is such a fun little tease. That is what I would call this comic, just a tease, because it just gives us just enough to. Like, I don't know. When I first opened it, I was like, "Oh, we're going to get answers." And I was like, "No, you're not."
No, we're just going to get options taken off the table. Basically, is all it is.
And I think it's because I think the extra material is all technically stuff you don't need for the story.
Yeah.
Like, that's why it's extra material and it's not in the table of contents. So it made sense in retrospect, but I got my own hopes up for a sec.
Yeah.
But I really like the aesthetic of this comic, like the bright reds, the pale blues,
Yeah.
and then everything else is very dark, like blacks, greys, browns. It reminds me a bit of what we sort of talked about in our Stand Stills, Stay Silent pilot season episode about like color palettes in comics.
Yeah, it was great, wasn't it? It really is a beautiful little depressing thing.
yeah, exactly. I really liked the style of this short little snippet. That said, I am very glad Wildbow also included the visually impaired text version of it. Not only because that's like a good thing to be doing just in general, but also I did not notice that the branch was missing until I went down and read that.
Yeah.
So I'm very glad I did.
Yeah, so the thing that happens in this is we see a picture of the branch without a ribbon, which is the marker for the detour. We hear a lot of crunching. We see Avery trying and failing to call Miss, John Styles, Lucy, and Verona to help her. None of that works. And then we see that the branch has been eaten. The marker for the detour has been eaten by the wolf. Which presumably doesn't mean that Avery can't get into the detour, just that she won't be able to find it. But she did notice it before. She did see that branch without a ribbon before when she first got to the wolf. So maybe she'll remember and be able to go down there. I don't know.
Well, I think the 2.3 extra material, like on the Forest Ribbon Trail, says that part of taking the detour is you have to cast down the branch.
Right.
Which I guess you just need to knock over the wolf.
Yeah, I guess that counts. Who knows?
Now that it's in their tummy, I don't know. It definitely it seems. I'm kind of just assuming now going forward that the detour isn't an option, because that seems to be the point of this comic. If that makes sense, so much of this is dedicated to showing that Avery doesn't have anyone who can come for her. And also, the fact that 2 panels are dedicated to showing this branch went missing seems to say to me that we should just assume that the detour is off limits. Otherwise, I don't know why there'd be so much emphasis on that.
I think the only person who can save her now is Snowdrop. So next chapter is going to be a Snowdrop interlude where Snowdrop escapes Nicolette Belanger's clutches, comes back, saves Avery, saves the day, and then becomes the boon companion in the place of Avery and stays with the wolf forever. And that's just a real fuck you to the audience at the end of it.
Oh man, making Gabe's interlude.
Exactly.
Cheery.
It's an escalation on Gabe's interlude.
My only other Galaxy Brain pick for an interlude next chapter was the wolf.
Ooh, what would that even be?
Just because I want to learn the underlying stuff of the path, but I don't know. I feel like we're either heading for an interlude chapter or Verona and Lucy freak out time.
Yeah.
Which would be its own kind of fun.
Damn. We'll see. We'll have to see.
Nicolette, I feel like is the other thing, because that seems powerful to me, that she was just able to infiltrate Avery's trip to the Forest Ribbon Trail, within an hour or so of the Happy Tree Friends fight. I don't know. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
I'm more worried about going up against Nicolette if she can do shit like this.
Well, I don't know. That's to even have to worry about that. We've got a few things that we need to solve first. So I'm focused on the more immediate problem of Avery's so fucked.
Well, they've got until the afternoon. I mean, they don't know that, but we know that.
Yeah, true. Man, Man, I mean, this plan of getting there for the Hungry Choir seems like it's not going to happen now, though, hey?
Yeah, you're right. I have given up on the idea that they will still be able to use this to deal with the Hungry Choir. It's now just stop
save
Avery from being stolen away.
Yeah, focus on that first. Cool. So that's the grim place that these chapters end. But before we wrap up, we want to dive into some predictions that people have left in our Pale Predictor spreadsheet and see what predictions we like from that.
Yes. So you can find a link to that in the show notes below if you've got any, hot predictions coming off of 2.9
out the kitchen.
Sorry?
I said fresh and hot out the kitchen.
Yep, exactly. So hit us up with any, from 2.9, the bonus bit, even whatever the next chapter is.
Yep.
What prediction have you brought this week?
I brought a prediction, just a little simple one from a user called Nathan, who, like Nathan without an H, who said that Lucy's pink hair is a marker that she was selected explicitly in order to succeed the Carmine Beast. Just a quick little prediction, but one that I quite like. I like the idea that these three are somehow related to the Carmine Beast, and this is a different take on it from some of the other ones we've talked about. Lucy's hair, just a little bit of foreshadowing. Yes, she's going to become the Carmine Beast.
Yeah, I mean, Lucy's hair is definitely like, a Chekhov's hair.
Yeah, that classic thing, Chekhov's hair.
It's funny, I'd kind of forgotten about the pink aspect to it, because obviously there's been a lot of focus on her hair just in the real world as well, like how to handle it. The pink aspect to it has to be something that's going to be important at some point, right? I would expect.
Yeah, you would think.
I mean, that's interesting. I wonder if that is... we talked a bit about how Miss is maybe setting up roles for herself or whatever. I wonder if this is all part of it. Like, if Lucy's meant to be the next Carmine, I don't know, would she be like the Carmine person? I don't know.
Yeah, the Carmine gal.
The Carmine Kennedy.
The Carmine Trio? Maybe that's something. That sounds like it could be something.
Well, what if Avery's being set up to be a finder so Miss can, I don't know, do something with that? Like, Miss is lost, so I'm just connecting finder and lost.
Yeah.
Fill in the gap of what the actual point of that is yourself.
Yeah.
Then Lucy's meant to be the Carmine Beast successor, which then I'm kind of like, okay, so what's Verona doing?
Becoming another.
Just becoming the local cat pest.
Yeah, becoming a cat. She'll get stuck. It's
her destiny.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so I pulled out a prediction by Uncle Thermoscales, who just sort of pointed out there was this little detail we didn't touch on where when Lucy was setting up the Nettle Wisp glamour, she used like her bank card to kind of like organize the powder on the paper.
To cut it up like she was doing cocaine, basically.
Yeah, I mean, basically. And that's what Uncle Thermoscales has touched on, this idea that like if some of it got stuck on her bank card and it stays there as like white powder, and then for whatever reason her mum finds her wallet and sees a bank card with like white powder spread along the bottom, like that's going to raise pretty fucking serious questions.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Oh boy, yeah, that sounds bad. I mean, we'll see. Again, if we get to the point where that's our biggest problem, great. That sounds great at this point to me.
Yeah, if the biggest problem is one of the Kenneteers' parents think they're on drugs, I'll call that a win.
Yep.
You're right.
Yep, definitely. Oh man, I'm so worried for these three. Anyway, that's the end of the show. We usually do a discussion question. We didn't do one last week, but we have picked a new one for us to discuss for next week. So leave your answers to that in the thread down below. That discussion question is, to clarify, design your own path based on a loose story type in as much detail as you'd like. So what would be on the story, on the path for this kind of story?
Yeah, so obviously the Forest Ribbon Trail seems to be based on stories about, getting sucked into another world and trying to get home.
Yep.
And yeah, so I guess, is there another sort of soft genre or story structure that you think might get a path like this, and, just talk about, what it might be like? I mean, this is one of the more creative writing type discussion questions we used to run during Deep Impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be keen to see a kind of Narnia-esque, like a bit more of an adventure story type, right? Because Narnia books were all like, oh, you get sucked into this other world.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Someone wants to write that, please do.
So we'll talk about those next week.
Yeah. That's the end of our show, folks. So if you came just for the outro, you can stop skipping ahead now because it's about to come up. So I hope you're all excited.
And welcome.
Welcome to the main part of the show. Thanks for everyone for tuning in. Again, leave your answers to our discussion questions in the discussion thread link down below. If you'd like, why not leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or iTunes or Stitcher or whatever, man. You do you.
Yes, if you want to see my live reads, they're over on Twitter, at MediaMD Podcast. We will be changing the name of that soon, though, probably.
Yes.
But for now, head on over to at MediaMD Podcast and check it out.
Yeah, if you haven't heard, the MediaMD Podcast, one of our other shows that we do, is coming to an end. So check out the penultimate episode, which has gone out a few days ago, which is talking about Battlestar Galactica, which is a pretty good show that I quite liked.
Yep, and you didn't butcher the name of at all.
Isn't that it? Sorry, I only watched a few episodes of it, so I feel like I'm not quite I'm not quite up to date on my Battlestar, you know?
Yeah. No, that's fair. As part of ending Media MD as well, we will be taking on a bit more of a role at the Doofcast. So if you head on over to patreon.com/doofmedia, you may notice that some of the tiers involve forcing people on the Doofcast to watch stuff. So we are now available to, if you so feel, to donate, and you can name us as people you want to watch something.
Don't tell them, Elliot. Then they'll do it, and then we'll have to watch anime.
No, I'm pretty sure Scott will still be first choice
Scott's
for the
animes. The one that everyone loves inflicting anime on, so let's just keep that meme going as long as possible so I don't have to go off and watch whatever.
You know what I don't want to watch? Space sci-fi shows. Don't do that.
But the problem is then people are going to recommend like Cowboy Bebop or something that's like a space sci-fi anime just to fuck with you. No, Doofcast already did Cowboy Bebop, so that's off limits, everybody. No Cowboy Bebop allowed. While you're on Patreon,
you go.
While you're on Patreon, why not check out Wildbow's Patreon as well? If you want to exchange the coin to him and get back the cat skull, there's only one good place to do it, and that's patreon.com/Wildbow. Yes,
exactly. He gives great boons to those of us who give him the coin. He's the wolf, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe he's the wolf. Is he Snowdrop, or is he the wolf, I guess is the question. Or is he Nicolette Belanger?
No, it's how Avery asked for the addled old wolf.
Right.
You could accidentally also ask for the wild boar, but you miss a boar. And so then you get the wild bow.
Yeah.
And he trades you stories in exchange for the coin.
In exchange for the coin. I like that. What's the precious thing that he takes away from you? Just your sanity, I guess.
The characters that he characters
of his stories, yeah. He creates precious things just to take them away. Classic wolf trick. So if you want that, I guess, go to Wildbow's Patreon and chuck him some coin or some woven baskets or whatever you can afford to do.
Yes.
All right, folks, that's the end of our show. So have a good time, and we'll see you next time.